We're going to get started with the session, Eye Tracking Technology for Communication and Computer Access in Severe Cerebral Palsy. It works. The speakers will be Professor Elagas Mombalieu and Dr. Saranda Bekteshi.
All right. Welcome, everyone. And thank you very much for being here. So I'll just give a very brief introduction, and then Elagas will take it over. So what we're going to see today is the first part is the importance of gaming in clinical practice, both for training and assessments. Then you're going to see our clinical guidelines, so the eye gaze clinical guidelines and the 9 categories, how to record and interpret eye movements and heart rate variability. And then you get a small extra treat, and that is our new eye tracking study with some results.
No. Technology, era of technologies. So we live indeed in an era of technologies, and we also know in our goal population or goal group what the difference new technologies can make. But at the same time, sorry. Yes, that's good. Yeah, good. But if there's one thing that we have in common with people with disabilities is actually the pursuit for independence. The pursuit for independence, making sure that it's such a big part of quality of life. And you all know, of course, the possibilities we have. You've seen it downstairs, you've seen it throughout presentations. Mobility, communication, leisure, free time, learning, it's so important. And new technologies, of course, we should place that within a kind of framework of functional activities, participation, but also what it means for themselves, their personal development, but also where we, as the external factors, can take a place in that. But if we go back again to the several levels of disability, you of course know that if you're there with a difficult hand function, with no possibilities to sit, no possibilities to talk, then of course you know there's a challenge for all these aspects. Independent mobility, communication, but even access to computer technology, gaming. When we talk about, for example, the expressing, I want to go to the bathroom, I'm hungry. Small things, but really important indeed for the daily activities, daily parts of life. But also play, fun, education, all aspects you place within that ICF model. And then if you focus on severe cerebral palsy, then it's very difficult. Very difficult to have all these aspects tick the boxes or filled in. And that's where we have assistive technology as an answer, as a lever, as a window towards indeed all these aspects of activity, communication, mobility, etc. Of course, CP, that's the first focus we make here in our research group. And if you talk about CP, you know that CP is the most common neuromotor disorder worldwide. CP, based on the fact there's something happened during pregnancy, or just before, during or after birth, an oxygen deficit, a bleeding, and leading to a brain lesion. Leading to a brain lesion, and the result there is, it has an impact on communication, it has an impact on mobility, it has an impact on cognition. Important in there is that all these comorbidities will have an impact. But we also see differences based on the timing when the lesion happens in CP, based on the timing that the lesion happens during pregnancy or just before, during, or after birth. It can lead to different classifications. You have spastic CP, you have dyskinetic CP, you have ataxic CP. So that's based on the place where the lesions are in the brains. We will not focus too much on that today, but it's important because it can sometimes be a direction in which technology you use or which one not. So again, if we go to the overview, where can we place these population CP in what they can or not? So if we focus on CP and the most severe ones, we know that in hand function, manual function, 23% they are classified in the level 4, 5 in the manual ability classification system. That's a classification used to place what they can or not. And levels 4, 5 are the most severe ones. That's for manual function. If we talk about speech, dysarthria or anarthria, we know that 32% they are very difficult to understand or even have no ability to speak. So that's where we are right now. But even if we go then to, instead of here, we talked about in general, but if we go, for example, to dyskinetic CP, then it's even much more. Much more, based on that classification, based on that lesion, we talk about 70% they have no ability to handle, or 70% they have no ability to speak. So we have to find a solution for it, because they have the same wishes. The same wishes, indeed, also to be active within that ICF model with fun, mobility, communication, etc. But also, of course, to communicate. So when we talk about these most severe ones, severe spastic CP, severe dyskinetic CP, of course, it's quite clear that it's very difficult for them to handle a cursor, to move, or to handle a mouse, to move the cursor on the screen, or to use a keyboard to type in the words and to go on the internet, or even to play games. So for that, we have something else. Something else, and that's this, eye tracking. Saranda and me, we're together coming from Bruges, from the Neurorehabilitation Technology Lab. And the focus of our lab there is very much on how we can use new technologies for people with complex movement disorders. We divide it in several levels, mobility, but today we will take the focus on eye tracking. Eye tracking, because eye tracking is giving the possibility to make, with that infralight detecting the eyes, making contact with the eyes, and then at the same time also the eye movements transformed in indeed a cursor movement that can place the cursor on another place on the screen. So why is that important? It is a window to communication. It's a window to computer access. It's a window to gaming, leisure. They're not that different than our children. They're not that different than we are. They want to have fun. And gaming is a really important part of that. You've seen that here downstairs, right? So also a window to participation, socializing, to make fun, to make jokes with brothers, sisters, siblings, with friends, but also activity participation. And that is key. Coming back again to that ICF model, it's really important to focus on what they really want. That's key. That's also what we deliver. We deliver that in the knowledge that known that it works for some, assumed that it may work for others, but important is the evidence. We may say that it works, but actually we want to prove that it works, because sometimes you can deliver a high-tech product that costs a lot of money, but does it really work? Is it really the right product for that person? Yes or no? So that's the reason why underpinning evidence is important, with evidence is important. And exactly that's what we do. Since 2017, we have a clear focus in our Neurorehabilitation Technology Lab on eye gaze, communication access, computer access, right? With evidence-based underpinning, research, translating this indeed into, of course, papers, but then again, translating into straightforward guidelines, how to use it. And also that is important, because you can write a paper and it can come in the drawer. No, that's not what we want. What we do is the research to make sure that it's go back to the clinical field. Translating. Eye tracking is one of them. And eye gaze clinical guidelines are really important indeed to bring that indeed back to the clinical field, back to the end users, back to the peers. So that's something that we did together with an international group. We developed eye gaze clinical guidelines. We did that together with the Eyes on Communication Research Group. So who is that? That's a large group. That's a large group worldwide. So by the way, we will divide this session in 4 blocks. Eye gaze clinical guidelines, then we'll go to eye tracking games, eye movements and user experience, eye tracking cognitive training, and that's in for Saranda. But the eye gaze clinical guidelines were developed with a lot of people from the United States, to indeed Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia, South America or Mid-America. And why is that important? Collaboration is key. Collaboration is key to make sure that we do not develop a guideline only for the happy few. No, it's to roll out worldwide. And that's important because we should speak the same language. And of course, Saranda and myself are also involved as a representative from our research lab. So the research team and advisory panel. Advisory panel, of course, not only researchers were involved, clinicians were involved, people with complex movement disorders were involved, parents were involved, peers were involved. And how we did that? We did that, of course, in a structured way. We did a Delphi study. And in a Delphi study, that means you have several rounds where you make statements then that you discuss, bring it to another round, and then based on that Delphi study, you come to straightforward guidelines, how to use, when to use, what is the goal group, what could work, what not, what is the best setup, all things statements which are really important indeed for our rollout of eye gaze, eye tracking in the clinical field. So here we are, eye gaze control technology for people with CP. It was really important. It was an answer on a clear need. An answer on a clear need to give indeed these guidelines of assessment, how to trial, how to implement, how to support, based again to review, because it's not only the use, it's also the evaluation to make sure that you use it in the right way. So we separated that in several levels. We separated that in the level of assessment, we separated that in the level of implementation, and we separated that in the preparation for the future use of eye gaze control technology. So several sections from 1 to 8, I will highlight you some of them. Some of them, for example, here, initial assessment. Statements, questions, for example, what is the most important to know about the person using eye gaze control technology? And then, of course, if you use eye gaze. So that means, of course, you need to have that ability of vision, right? But of course, we built that up, and by the way, you can find this, and also you can reach out to us. We were happy to share all these guidelines. You can find them also online, but come after the session, come to us, and we will share that with you. Leave your message, give your email, and we're happy to share that with you. But examples also of online resources. There's a lot of available already, but it's also to weave it all together. To weave it all together, so it's not scattered. It's bringing the glue in it, making sure that from the eye pointing classification scale, there's something to use, the visual function classification scale, that's something to use, but you have to overarch it, bring it together, and to make sure that is giving the right direction for your end client. Assessment, really important. The second one is, of course, that's the hands-on. That's the implementation, the learning, practice, support, then the follow-up, then the outcome measurement, the funding considerations also, because there's a high cost for it. So these are all things, questions, challenges that people in the field, clinicians, but also, of course, the people, the end users face, and helping them to find an answer on that. Helping them to find an answer on that. For example, the resources. What is important to know about the resources? The guidelines to assessment of eye pointing. But of course, it's step by step there. We'll not go through it because that will lead us too further away. But what is important to know about the person's frequency of practice and support? How much should you use? Is that in a boost therapy? Is that one a day, once a week? Is that every day? These are all things that matters. And these things bringing together in these guidelines are really important. Again, not based on one consensus group in Belgium or another group in Australia. No, a worldwide group in a very structured way, Delphi study, that brought us to these straightforward guidelines. Implementation, outcome measure. Outcome measures, of course, you have examples of online sources. We share this with you. But of course, again, you have to bring the glue into that and making sure that you point the right scales, that you use the right scales, how to indeed bring it again to the clinical field. Eye gaze control technology for people with CP is really important. We know the value, and the clinical guidelines are there available since 2021. We are happy to share that with you. So indeed, after the session, you can come forward and indeed leave your message here or your email here. We're happy to help you out. Okay. I hand over again now to Saranda.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Elias, for the very good overview of the guidelines. Do you hear me? You hear me well? Okay, so now we're going to go step by step into the different research that we've done since 2017. And then the way we wanted to bring this to you is not specifically on how a research paper would be structured. So all this research is published. You can find online more information, but we wanted to bring you that translation into the guidelines. So starting with games. I think we all probably have a favorite game. Mine is this one. It's called Gardenscapes. And it's one that I stuck with since a year and a half now. So I follow its progress. I find myself playing it, I don't know, when I have a coffee break at work, especially before I go to sleep. And then I was thinking with a whole research mindset, why is that? Like, why cannot I get rid of this app? And that's because I find it relaxing. It gives me a break of the stresses of the day-to-day. It is challenging, so it keeps me going back to it because sometimes I'm stuck for days in one level and then I want to solve it. And then once I do it, it gives me that rewarding feeling back. And this is not different for kids with severe disabilities. So this is one of the kids that I worked with, and she loved this game. So actually it was one of the motivations for her. So we were doing other tasks, and then I was giving her the promises that once we'll finish, she's going to play this game and then she can go back to her class. So we used eye tracking games for training, and we used eye tracking games for assessments. And I think this is very important for everyone who works in clinical practice, everyone who works with eye gaze, because it turned out to be one of the most efficient ways, both in costs and in time and in methods, to train these kids and then to assess their progress. So starting with games for training, you see there we have 2 papers already where we used it, both in a first pilot study of eye tracking gaming intervention, and then another one that we did years later of an intensive eye tracking gaming specific in multiple case studies. So what the games offer is this very fun, very engaging way to work with kids from early ages of, I don't know, starting from early ages of 3 all the way to young adults, because they are motivating. And at the same time, the clinicians can choose the games that actually have a goal. For example, if you would like to teach something that has to do with cognition and you choose a game that has puzzles, or you want to teach turn taking, you choose a game that is engaging with, I don't know, a lumberjack or some stars. And then with that, you teach the skill sets of tasks that can be translated into activities of daily life. For example, a simple game like these ones can teach so many basic skills that are very important for eye tracking technology. So such is, for example, the operational competences. In order for these children to use the system, they need to be able to first learn this cause and effect. They need to be able to scroll or navigate in the screen. They need to be able to learn that dwell control in order to be able to select. So those can be taught through games, and then they can be translated into more specific goals of communication, for example, or typing on a keyboard, and other skills. So how that looks like, for example, this is one of the participants that we had, and you see that he's very fast scrolling and selecting on the screen. So what we learned from these gaming interventions, so the first pilot that we did, we had 10 kids with dyskinetic cerebral palsy, and the kids played games for 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week for 5 weeks. So that's not a lot, but we do see significant improvements pre, post, and follow-up. And then also we saw, so what these numbers mean is that the higher this eye movement accuracy was, the better they performed. And this means that the more they use these games, not only we give this possibility of them for leisure and fun, but we can also train these eye movements. So it can actually impact the eye movement control. So over time, kids get better. So it's a win-win in all aspects. In the latest study, so that was published in 2024, we decided to not do a bit of a one-size-fits-all of what we did with the pilot study, but we decided to tailor these interventions for every child in the knowledge of how heterogeneous diagnosis like dyskinetic cerebral palsy or cerebral palsy in general is. So what we did here is we had 4 participants, and the clinicians, together with the parents, with the teachers, and with the children themselves, identified 2 goals that they wanted to train. So we trained the first goal for 2 weeks intensive training, and then the second goal for another 2 weeks intensive training. And the goals were reflecting the abilities and the interests of the children. So they were going from yes and no response to teaching cause and effect, to being more complex, such as, for example, learning words and making sentences. And what we found here, one of the outcome measures, so there were a lot more that we had in this study, but one of them was that in such a short time, all the goals that we set were reached, and most of them were much more than expected. And I think what this means is that intensity matters. Personalizing the interventions or the training programs matters. And having an open mind, I think that matters even more. So when we set these goals and when we identify the goals, most of the clinicians, based on what we see here, is that they underestimated the children. So they thought the kids in 2 weeks will have 3-4 words, and the kid did double that. Going to the games for assessments. So besides using the games for training, you can use them also to assess progress before you start with the training program and after you start with the training program. And one thing that we did here was that we used 3 sets of games that would allow us to assess their navigation on the screen. And on the other side, we had 3 other games in which you see, in order for there something to happen, there is that need for that 1 second dwell. And we call these static games, and then we calculated a success rate. So this is in the paper, And then you would see that there was significant improvements both in screen navigation as well as in the dwell. So as Elegas mentioned, of course, you have the eye and you have the gaze and you have the tracker, and all of this connects back to the control and the importance of the eye movements. So to explain what the eye movements are, I chose the Where's Waldo picture because I think it's something that we can all relate, or probably something that frustrated most of us when we were searching Waldo in this very busy beach. So this is my performance. And actually, I find it funny because the moment I found him, I probably got a bit excited. So there's like tons of fixations right at that place. But this is the number of fixations, and this is my eye movement behavior when I was searching for Waldo here. Then COVID happened. Waldo became very responsible, following all the rules. So he started social distancing. So it was much easier to find him in this picture. Why is this important? It gives that difference between the goal and the eye movement behavior. So the goal was the same in both. I had to find Waldo in both pictures. The visual stimuli that I received is so different that my eye movement behavior is completely different. So this and this is not the same. And the reason why this is important is that when you would like to do or to use games for assessment, for example, it's extremely important that you use exactly the same ones, either pre or post, or if you want to compare between, for example, kids that you work with. So what you see here is the number of fixations, and then there's the blue line which connects them, so the interfixation intervals. Another thing extremely important in human-computer interfaces, including eye tracking technology, is user experience. So the way I see it is the difference between what feels as a chore and what feels as fun. And what feels as fun, we like to do it, like that game that I played for 1.5 years. And what seems as chore, we simply just don't want to do it. This is very important, and this is very critical, because this is that make it or break it. So will the kid be willing to continue using it in the knowledge of the therapist that within weeks the kid will become better and better and better, because now we have evidence to prove that? Or will the kid see it as a chore and just simply refuse to use it? So it's that technology discontinuance, which is not something that we want. So if you would see one of the participants that we have here, she's very good, she's very smart, but she's struggling, for example, to play this game. So you see the amount of fixation she does. She knows exactly what she needs to do, but she doesn't have the control to do it because of these involuntary movements, which also affect the eye. So the connection is, we have the eye movements, then does this impact control, and then performance? Does it lead to frustration? Will it lead to that make it or break it point? So would she continue using it, or will she say, nah, this was not fun, because she was trying to do that. The game is actually very nice, but she just, maybe it was not fun for her because it was, the control was not there. So we explored these eye movements, again, as I said, using games with different difficulties. And we also included heart rate variability as a measure of stress, which then translates to this user experience. So without going into too much detail, we had the performance, and then we had tons of eye movement variables. And we compared kids with dyskinetic cerebral palsy and healthy peers, so age-matched healthy peers. And what we found here is that all you see in red is the eye movement variables. And there were no differences between typically developing kids and children with severe dyskinetic cerebral palsy. And I think that is the reason why eye tracking works, because the control of the eyes is better than controls of the hand, for example, or the control of the feet. What was very interesting for us is that for the same games, these kids took twice as long. So if it's not the eye movements, then there is something else which made them perform the same tasks twice as long. And then in terms of the user experience, again, a lot of variables with the heart rate variability. But basically what was interesting for us was the stress index. And in the knowledge that heart rate variability is a measure, an index of the autonomic nervous system. So it actually shows how healthy the heart is. But also it shows how able we are to adapt to different stressors. So as healthy people, our heart adapts very fast. It brings us to this homeostasis, and then we just come back to a regular state. This is not the case for kids with cerebral palsy, and the more severe the cerebral palsy is, the worse it is for them. So this connects to that increasing stress, which exacerbates movement disorders, which makes it more difficult for them to actually use an eye tracking device. So in the healthy kids, we start with a lower stress index, so this is in rest, and then they have a significantly higher stress index during performance. And that's probably because of not knowing the system, or just by the fact that they were performing instead of stress. With CP, we see a different, so we go from a very high one to almost the same. And we have two hypotheses for this. It's either that their cardiac autonomic mechanism is not efficient enough to adapt to stressors, or it could be that eye tracking is simply not a source of stress for these kids, which for us is a great news because it ticks another box there that the kids love to use it. It doesn't affect the way they, their profile. So our take-home message, you see, is that eye movements are fine, user experience is fine. We just need to give the opportunities, and that's not to see roadblocks, but to see challenges and to collaborate and work together in order to make these things happen for these kids. So going to the latest study that we've done, and that is, it's very, very novel. So I actually finished the data collection 3 weeks ago and rushed to do some analysis so I can bring it here and share it with you. We said that 30% of all CP are non-ambulant, they're non-verbal, and that translates to almost 5.4 million people worldwide. And 50% of them have some degree of cognitive impairments, which could be up to 9 million people worldwide. The issue that we have here is that only 3% of these people have their cognition assessed. So for a lot of them, cognition is assumed, and we can all agree, I think, that when we see a kid with very severe disabilities, our assumption of cognition does not favor them. So unless we see the kids or we work a lot with them, we would think that the severity of the motor profile resembles the severity of cognition. The issue that we have here is that we don't have reliable methodology. So all the tests that exist use pen and paper or their interviews, but here we have kids that cannot use pen and paper, and here we have kids that cannot verbally show what they know. So we had to find a way to reliably measure cognition in these 5.4 million people, starting, of course, from the hub of the kids that we work with. So working memory is one of the executive functions, and it is practically involved in most, if not all, of the tasks, activities that we do in our daily living. So it gives us that information. It gives that possibility to retain information. And then once the information is not available, is it sound or is it visual, to do something with it. So it helps a lot in decision making. And when it comes to eye tracking, so for example, the use of the communication board, why would this be important? To give you an idea, if a kid says, I want, and then he looks at all the choices he has, and he thinks, I might want a cracker, but the kid knows that there's 2 more pages and so many more options to see. So the kid goes to the second page and says, I might want an almond, I might want a rice cake. Of course, the kid has the third option, goes to the other page. So while going, these are all not available anymore. And then the kid says, maybe a chocolate biscuit. And then the kid has to retain this information and then to say, okay, I want a rice cake. So he has to go back to that page where he's seen the rice cake in order to be able to select it. So all this navigation through these different pages, getting rid of the distractions, at the same time remembering the options in order to make an informed decision, puts a lot of demand on working memory. So the working memory and the use of the AEC are very interlinked. The good news is that working memory can be trained, and that's where our new project comes to play. So we have an eye tracking working memory training that, as I said, finished a couple of weeks ago with on-board experts, international experts from Europe. So what sparked the idea for the project? As I said, first, that we don't have this methodology to be able to assess cognition in children that are non-motor and non-verbal, or non-motor, non-verbal way. And then also we were very, very intrigued by the fact that they took twice as long. So this has been something that's been dawning me for 3 years since we published this paper, why this happens. And then, of course, we have this new project. So I don't know, I have time, right? Yeah. So we have the two parts of this project. The first one is, of course, as I said, the methodology, and the second one is the intervention itself. So for the methodology, we recruit 20 participants with severe CP and 20 age-matched healthy peers. And this was work of more than 2 years with the team to find a way to reliably measure it in a computerized digital approach. So we make a combination between the state-of-the-art, the TD pilot, and the existing reliable tests in a computerized version, like, for example, the WISC or the NEPSI. And then these are just some pictures when we were doing the piloting, but then these are some other pictures when I've done the assessments themselves. So how this works is the iPads are connected via Bluetooth. The kid sees the tests, and then this is the iPad where I can control and I can read the questions and make sure that everything goes well. This is a typically developing child. And then here we have also the language comprehension. So besides the measures of the executive functions, we also measure language comprehension using the C-built. So the first part is the digital assessments, and the second part is the comprehensive insight. So this is work in progress. So hopefully in 2 years when I come back, then I can share this information as well, because we have combined a lot of state-of-the-art techniques, including EEG and heart rate variability, and different translations of executive functions in day-to-day tasks, like, for example, the brief questionnaire. For the computerized cognitive training, I don't know if you're familiar with CogMed. So this exists since 25 years now, and it's been initially made for autism and ADHD. So there's a lot of research there, but it has never been used in cerebral palsy. So we adopted this training. It is intensive, and I think what's very important is that it's adaptive. So what the software does has these tasks per child, so you create a profile, and then when the child performs better, the tasks get more difficult, and when the child makes errors, the tasks adapt immediately and they become easier. And the reason why this is very important is that in order to increase the working memory capacity, it's very important to push it to the limits. So these tasks can be very difficult for the ones who do very well. So we have a baseline, a pre, and the follow-up will be in a month from now. So at the moment we are at this stage, but the intervention itself is finished. And this is a video that I found on my phone. So I have better videos, which are not at the moment in the States. But this is one of the kids just doing the task. So basically there's the blue lights that she sees, and then she has to remember this information and then to select exactly the same ones that she's seen. If she selects them well, then there's 4, 5, 6 blocks. When she makes an error, it goes to lower blocks. Our outcome measures, we have the training gains, which is the direct impact. So this is the index that we get from the software itself. But in executive functions, it's the near transfer and the far transfer effects that are extremely important. So what this means is if we have an increase in working memory capacity, will this translate to untrained tasks, which are of the same perspective, let's say other working memory tasks, and will these transfer to other cognitive functions, daily activities, and participation? So our preliminary results are extremely promising. So we had the 4 participants, and all of them have very, very good improvement index. So this means that these 25 sessions, from the moment they started to the moment they finished, there was a huge learning curve. So by the time we were ending the training, the kids were getting better and better because of this intensive training, very structured, very tailored. And for the near transfer working memory effects, so this is the one of the tests that we use. So for example, the kid sees these 5 pictures. I give them around 30 seconds to memorize them. And then in the next photo, they see these 5, but then they see another 5. And then they have to remember and select exactly the ones that they've seen. And that's not only to select what they've seen, but if they get the order as well, that gets even more difficult, but brings them more points. So here again, you see these are the so we have one of the kids who was already very good. So you see that ceiling effect. There's a little bit of improvement, but she was already very good. But with the other ones, there's a huge improvement within 5 weeks with the whisk test that we did. So with this, I conclude my part of the presentation. One thing that we wanted to share with you, myself and Elegas are guest editors of this special issue that is specifically focusing on CP. If you're interested, the deadline is still open for another month and a half. So you can get one of these. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And we have time for Q&A. We specifically wanted to have time enough because it's in the interaction and the mind share that new ideas can well up and that we can make progress also for other projects, but also to share new insights with each other. Shoot. Who is awake? Who is using eye gaze in 1? Okay, good. 2. Who is in the business of selling eye trackers? 1. Okay. Who is a therapist here in the room? Okay. Who is in the industrial field? Okay, good. Is there something here that was mind-blowing or that was boring? Just to make it to make the that hits. Can you use
daily training?
Did you hear that? Could you hear the question in back? Can you use the mic? Thank you very much.
Is there a plan, hopefully in the future, to have a protocol so families can do this at home versus coming in for daily training with a therapist? Especially, we have a lot of families in rural areas.
Well, all that you've seen can be done at home. So for example, the cognitive training was initially planned as a home therapy. The problem that we had, well, not a problem, not a roadblock, but a little challenge, was that we worked very closely with the therapists. And when I had discussions with them over recruitment and the project plan, they proposed that it would be better if we actually do it together with them, because they were afraid that the parents are overloaded with work and they would not do it. But once, for example, the papers will come out, this Cochmet is just a sign-in online. So it just needs a computer or just needs the eye tracker, the games as well. So what we use is, of course, a little bit more advanced, and we try to have something that's been published, so we have to pay a little bit for licenses. But the clinical guidelines have pages of links of free eye tracking games, which do basically the same thing. For us, it's important because we want to publish it, and it's in a different perspective, but a lot of games that can be used to teach exactly the same things that we try to do here. So yeah, the parents can be as involved as.
Congratulations for the research. My English is not so good, but I will try to to share my experience. I work with ALS patients from Brazil, and the patients using eye tracking Tobii Gaming 5C. You can buy at the Amazon. It's about $215. So the software is very expensive, but you use OptiKey. Have you ever heard? It's a free software created for ALS patients to communication, to access a computer and home automation. The home automation. It's yes, thank you. So it's a wonderful resource for these people because they lost the communication. So a part of these patients have a frontotemporal what can I say? Sorry. They couldn't use because the frontotemporal of the yes, it's not working, and we only can know because the eye tracking, because the people don't move, don't have a movement, the people doesn't communication. And when we use eye tracker, when you try use eye tracking, I can see these people before the disease talking 3 languages, for example. But when you use the eye tracking with OptiKey, they couldn't do any words, for example, and we can see the comprometment.
The comparison.
Yes, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And the other thing, the guideline is very important to CP, but to patients with SMA, a lot of families to buy eye tracking early, and the people, the kids begin to learn read, or it's not good. It's not a good idea. It's a time to use eye tracking.
Yeah, but no,
Thank you.
no, thanks a lot for your comment. I think, of course, it's very valid because the experience that you have with that. But from our experience with CP, so very specific with CP, I have to say, for example, it's 10 years that I do the research. People are surprised, or other researchers, that I never had dropouts. It's as simple as that. The games worked great. So many other possibilities as well. Some therapy places where I go and they say we don't have eye trackers at all. Now there's a possibility to just download and install a software, and the camera of the computer works as an eye tracker. And this is just to show how much we believe and how much we advocate for it. It might not work for all the kids certainly. But I'm very confident that it works for the majority of them. So
and that is enter evidence. So that's really important, because you can say that it works, but you also have to prove that it works. And doing research with not only CP, but also 2 ALS, SMA, other severe complex movement disorders, or pathologists, it's important to do that research, to underpin that, to say the why, how, when, whom. That's really important.
So this is reminding me of, so there's a woman, Lavon, who works with the Scott Morgan Foundation for ALS, and she's very heavily on the industry side, and she's very much pushing with Lenovo this idea of using avatars for communication in the AI and voice. And so I was just curious your thoughts on these types of technologies for your patient population.
Oh, as mentioned already, we are living in the era of new technologies. We have so many possibilities. 50 or no, 70 years ago, or no, not that long ago. Yeah, already 60 years ago, they went to the moon. Now we will go to Mars. So there's so much technologies, we should use them. So avatars is definitely something also to go for. With pros and cons, probably, but we should assess, we should underpin when, how the best should work for which, and what is the timing, and also the training there is again an important one. Saranda mentioned it, boost training and intensity training is also an important one, because if you only use it once in a week, will it work? What is then the improvement you make? It's very simple, and you can even compare it. It's a motor learning training. It's a training, so that means indeed intensity matters, timing matters, age matters. Several parameters, knobs you can turn on, but you need the right guidelines, underpinned guidelines, when, how, for whom, and that's really important. So avatars, yeah, absolutely happy to discuss this further, because there's definitely a lot of possibilities in there.
So your study that you just finished speaking on, the eye tracking with cerebral palsy, it was primarily with children, correct?
the last one with the cognitive.
Yes.
Yeah, so the age was 7 to 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your comment about the lack of cognitive assessments for persons with both motor and speech impairments really stuck out to us, because we do a lot of just mainstream technology assessment and implementation and work with a lot of adults with CP. And that also is one of like the hardest factors to assess. So are you aware of any tools? I know the WISC that you mentioned, I looked up and it's validated through 16. Are you aware of any tools that could be utilized in that adult population for assessment of the cognitive skills for that specific population?
Yeah, I am.
Awesome.
So the reason why we went with age range 7 to 16 was just to standardize a little bit the assessments. But what you have, for example, the WISC-5 that you see 7 to 16, it has a WISC for adults, which starts from 17 to 95 or something. And similar for all of them. So I'm happy to share that information, then you'll just look it up. So there were tons of digital, not enough. I think it took me months to trial every test that there was, because 80% was okay, and then the other one was not. Or when you work with very young kids who they cannot read, half of the tests I just couldn't use because they're simply, but I'm happy to share with you the information, because the tests are for adults and for kids.
I'm really happy you mentioned the adult population, because there are a lot of people indeed also in that adult population that did not have the chance to use these new technologies, to use these new tools, and they also still they deserve that chance. So, and that's not only for eye tracking, that's also for mobility, that's also for gaming, that's also for learning. So they're not different than children. So the age span of children up to adults, it's from
Yeah.
To 99 years, I would say.
We also, I mean, I'm in the one study alone, I have 2 or 3 adults that don't use and that have very severe dysarthria, do not use an AAC device. I think because they just had such negative experiences when it was tried to be introduced and when they were younger, that they just decided it wasn't something that they wanted to do, and they would use their person companions to help speak for them. But even just like seeing this and seeing how you've done it in a more errorless learning implementation path that could build up that success, it would be interesting to see like maybe they would be reopened to it at this point, but also just any digital based interventions or assessment, we need to understand that cognitive piece. So yeah.
And that success experience is really important, and that's the reason why gaming can really get kind of a red carpet towards the starting and learning and having that to implement it in the daily life.
Hi, so I also work with a CP population, and we do a lot in our center with visual processing. So I don't know if you guys consider that CVI or cortical cerebral visual impairment. That can be a big issue with kids. There's not good translation between gaming and being able to use this kind of eye tracking for communication when you have a visual processing delay, and also auditory processing delay. So considering those things, and with especially the population you're looking at, GMFCS level 3 and 3 to 5, they have about a 70% chance of having CVI at some level. And so kind of knowing what that is, we do a lot of evaluations for AAC for this population. So like knowing what that level of visual processing is before we implement it, because I've seen kids that they tried to introduce it way too soon and it's a complete shutdown. They won't take to it. Like they're done. You have to start back at very simple forms of communication using eyes because they can't process the visual information.
Yeah, fully agree. Thanks a lot for bringing this up. Yeah, so we didn't do specific measures for CVI, although we have one of the experts in CVI on board. And the only reason why was the protocol was getting too much. So already it was getting too much. Yeah, so that was the only reason, but it's certainly something that that we will consider. Yeah. And if you have all the little tricks of how to do that, I'm more than happy to to write some of them down.
It's very often the feasibility of a study. Yeah? So is it feasible? So, and then
You know, people that like are very steep in CVI will that say you can't really test cognition without doing with their visual processing. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.